So I get emails and private messages and other communications from persons asking me to assist them with correcting their shooting. Sometimes these emails and private messages are prefaced with statements like, well, I shoot pretty good except, or I shoot pretty good but. And then they proceed to describe that they either shoot low to the left, low and left, they shoot high, they're stringing them out to the left, or so forth. One of the first bits of advice I would give you if you're considering giving me some kind of email or communication like this is to recognize that no, you don't shoot good. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. We're going to have to be honest about this, that having a relatively tight group that is in completely the wrong place is a bad shot. It is wrong. So everybody would kind of agree that shooting like this is pretty bad. This is pretty bad shooting too. So is that. So is this. So is that. And so is this. Ultimately, if you're grouping it and looking something like this, you're not shooting good. Now that we've gotten past that, let's talk a little bit about the philosophy I have regarding accuracy and shooting, and we'll put this into play in correcting any of the errors some of these errors. I won't say any. I won't say all. Shooting the errors on the targets that I've got here for you to review. And it's this, is that your shooting can be boiled down to three things. Is that you need to be sighting the gun. You have to be pressing that trigger so it doesn't disturb the sights, so the shots go where the shots go where the sights are telling you that the gun is pointed, and nothing more. And we can trace all of your errors back to one of those three things: that you are either not properly sighting the gun, that you are improperly pressing the trigger, or you're doing something more. This method of correction, like my other methods of instruction, are heavily influenced by Albert Einstein and his philosophies. One of his quotes is that any intelligent fool can make things bigger, more complex, and more violent. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. So we're going to take error correction and we're going to try and make it simpler by being courageous and being a genius. When you sight the gun, it's telling you where the shots are going. When you press the trigger without disturbing the shots, you get a shot where the sights were, and then you don't do anything more. And oftentimes it is the error in one of those three things that is causing you to have some problems. If you are not properly sighting the gun, then you have some pretty gross errors. Let's just review it. Here's your front sight. There is your rear sights. The top of those should be all one level, and your front sight should be centered inside the notch of the rear sight. During the time that you're shooting, you're going to notice that front sight may be wobbling, or that the whole gun is wobbling. Ignore this and press the trigger. As long as your front sight is in the notch of the rear sight, you can actually expect a very accurate shot based on the standard width of most handguns, the notch in the rear sight of most handguns, and the width of the front sight, that you can actually take the front sight and move it over where it's touching the inside edge of the sight from your perspective to the right, and you'll only move that shot about 1.5 inches to the right. Likewise, if you move your front sight all the way to the left inside edge of your notch, you will only move that shot about 1.5 inches to the left at 7 yards. The same variation up and down will result in the same level of inaccuracy up and down. So you can actually expect a 3-inch grouping at 7 yards if you have your front sight inside the notch. So why aren't people shooting a 3-inch group at 7 yards with regularity? Because they saw a perfect sight picture, they slapped at the trigger, they jerked at it, and they disturbed the sights much more than if they had just pressed through the wobble. They actually were seeking greater accuracy and ended up with greater error. Now, proper trigger manipulation is done with the distal pad of the finger placed upon the trigger and actually should be perpendicular to the bore axis. The press on the trigger initially is going to be very easy. You're going to feel all this slack, all this easy moving the trigger. Take that up until you feel the pressure build. And then from that point, continue to press very slowly directly rearward until the shot fires. This should come as a bit of a surprise to you. So we've talked about sighting, we've talked about pressing the trigger correctly. Now let's talk about do nothing more. A lot of error can be attributed to doing something more. We'll couple this with some things with improper trigger press, but when you end up with shots that aren't landing where you pointed the gun, it's because the gun was not pointed where you wanted it when the shot was actually fired. If you wanted a shot to go here and you ended up with a shot down here, it's because the gun was pointed here when it actually went bang. I know that sounds simplistic. I'm not being a smart aleck, but that's the truth. And you need to recognize you made the gun point from here down to there before the shot actually broke. You may have thought you were sighting here, but the proof is that you shot down here, which means the gun was sighted down there. So let's put these two things together as we talk through some of the discernible patterns of errors and why they are occurring as they're occurring. Simply, you don't have a clue. I'm not sure I can help you unless this target was at 100 yards, in which case I'd call it a really good shot. This downward triangle appearance that we get here on these shots, this is pure anticipation of the shot. As the shooter knew or afraid of the gun, or possibly just looking to gain some form of speed, has lined up the sights, they've begun to press the trigger, and just before the shot actually fires, they push the front of the gun down. An anticipatory flinch, some type of I know the gun's going to go bang, and tensing up against recoil that has not occurred, results in that downward triangle of shots on the paper. Low and left. One of the more common errors that you'll see out on a firing line, jerking on the trigger. What you need to understand when we say jerking on the trigger is that the shooter has lined up the gun, they've got it pointed there, and then they violently press on the trigger. They dictate or direct the shot is going to be fired, and when they do that, the gun almost invariably goes down low in the left. It's another form of that pre-ignition push, that anticipatory flinch. The shooter is directing the shot to happen, and that rapid acceleration of the trigger causes the front sight to go low and left. A pattern of shots moving out increasingly in that leftward triangle. Though some persons might anticipate this to be something along the lines of too little finger on the trigger and pushing the gun to the left as they fire the shots, it can also be the shooter changing the pressure of the grip with the left hand. As they anticipate the shot to fire, they will start to pull just gently to the left. Stringing of shots up and down but left of the target. I would look for a shooter that actually has sights that are wrong, but they're just nice and consistently up and down with a little bit of that pre-ignition push, not so much of a pattern of shots in the triangle, just going up and down instead. Once you understand pre-ignition push with a downward push on the front of the gun, you'll recognize this as a form of pre-ignition push or some type of anticipatory flinch when the shooter heels the gun and presses against it. Just as the shot gets ready to break, they start to stiffen up with the hands, they heel, and the front of the gun will come up. Correcting some of those errors. They're all caused by something. You're doing something. And so, not to sound like a smart aleck, stop doing that. If you know that you're about to flinch or push, you've got to get back to the point of slowing down your trigger press to where you don't do it. You don't know when the shot's going to happen, therefore you don't pre-ignition push. You don't flinch. Correcting that low and left is recognizing that the shooter has got their shooting house in disorder, that they think a proper sight picture is far more important than their trigger press. So as the gun begins to wobble or shake and things get bad, they finally see what appears to be a good sight picture for a moment, so they try to direct the shot to happen at that exact moment in time. The shooter has to go back and understand once again that they'll have a much better shot if they simply accept the wobble or the shake and press the trigger smoothly, and they'll end up with a grouping of shots instead of a stringing of shots out to the side. I can't make you stop pulling your gun to the left. I can point out that maybe you're pulling with your left hand or tightening your left grip. I can maybe suggest that you tighten your grip first so that it's harder for you to increase the pressure since you're already gripping it quite firmly. Pre-ignition push. You're pushing the gun down, not me. You're the one that has to stop doing that. I have been known to place my hands in front of the shooter's trigger guard like this, and just a very gentle rest against the gun, but then they can feel it when they start to push against the gun. Even if I place my hand right here, sometimes they'll actually whack it. What I'm saying is that I actually have a gap between my hand and their frame, and as they begin to shoot, they'll feel as they have pushed the gun down and pressed it in to my finger. But only you can stop pushing the gun down. I don't know what to do for you if you're pressing the gun up, except to point out and educate you and make you cognitively aware that you are pushing the gun up like that. I could possibly place a dummy cartridge into your magazine, and in each case you will see the gun go whoop straight up. I can possibly put a dummy cartridge into the gun so that you can see that pre-ignition push down or up, or see the pull to the side or the low and left as you jerk violently on the trigger. But to bring this all together here at the end, a summation, is that we've got three things that we need to do when we're shooting. We have to sight the gun, we have to press the trigger without disturbing the sights, and then nothing more. We can trace errors back to some kind of mistake in one of those three things. Either we are truly not sighting the gun properly, we are doing something horribly wrong with our trigger manipulation, or we're doing something more. I believe that one of the hardest things for you is to do a self-diagnosis without an understanding what the proper technique is. That if you've never actually pressed the trigger properly in your life, you'll never recognize that you're improperly pressing the trigger. If you are constantly pulling to the left with your left hand, you've never felt what it feels like to not pull with the left hand. If you've never felt what it's like to not press, to do a pre-ignition push or an anticipatory flinch, to not heel the gun, then you don't know how to diagnose it. Now you've seen the targets, you understand that, that's what the pattern of shots indicates, and now you know that this is what you're doing. How do you get back to the point of doing it right? Slow down. It is almost always ego, the belief that you know what you're doing, that's leading you to have these errors, so go back to the core, most basic fundamentals and repeat them until you've got them right. More importantly, pay attention to how it feels. When you properly press the trigger, having properly aligned the sights and did nothing more, you will get a great shot, and you need to pay attention to how that feels. You have to make each shot feel like that. Once you've learned what a good shot feels like, you can begin to recognize the bad shots.